Many people spend their entire lives trying to become someone they believe others will accept, admire, or validate, but very few dare to be fully, unapologetically themselves. The fear of authenticity is one of the most widespread psychological wounds, often rooted in early patterns of judgment, rejection, and emotional punishment. When a person grows up learning that being themselves brings negative consequences, mockery, neglect, comparison, or even silence, they internalize the belief that their true identity is flawed, embarrassing, or unworthy. Over time, this shapes the mind into constructing a protective mask, a carefully engineered persona designed to survive socially. But wearing a mask comes at a cost. They lose access to their natural impulses, intuition, freedom, and creativity. They walk through life feeling watched, evaluated, and constantly pressured to perform. Even when surrounded by friends or family, they carry the silent fear that if people knew who they really were, what they truly think, desire, or struggle with, they would be abandoned. This internal conflict becomes exhausting, creating an identity that is fragmented, confused, and painfully distant from the self they once were before fear took over. The psychology behind this fear often begins in small and subtle ways that seem harmless on the surface but shape how a person learns to exist. A child who is constantly corrected, compared to others, or told that their emotions are too much, absorbs the message that their natural emotional responses are unacceptable. A teenager who expresses themselves differently through clothing, thoughts, or dreams, and receives rejection instead of curiosity learns quickly that conformity is safer than authenticity. As adults, these individuals may appear confident, funny, or even charismatic, but internally they navigate the world like a minefield, avoiding anything that could reveal their true inner landscape. This creates what psychologists call self-alienation, a disconnection from one's own identity so deep that the person no longer knows who they would be without their carefully constructed mask. They begin to evaluate every word before speaking, every desire before acting, and every feeling before acknowledging it. The mind becomes a filter rather than a home, and the internal narrative turns into constant self-surveillance. Their greatest fear is not failure, but exposure, because exposure threatens the fragile identity they rely on to feel safe around others. People who fear being themselves often suffer from a chronic need for approval, a psychological dependency where self-worth is entirely determined by the reactions of others. This makes them highly sensitive to criticism and extremely cautious about expressing opinions that might cause conflict or disagreement. They carefully study social environments, mirroring behaviors, adjusting their tone, and modifying their interests to match those around them. This survival strategy, known as social masking, may help them fit in temporarily, but on a deeper level, it reinforces the belief that who they truly are is inadequate. The more they hide, the more foreign their authentic self becomes. Eventually, they begin to question their own preferences. Do I really like this, or do I just pretend to? And the line between genuine and artificial blurs. They may also find it difficult to form deep connections because vulnerability feels too dangerous. Instead, they maintain surface-level relationships where emotional exposure is minimal. Over time, this creates loneliness even in crowded rooms. Their heart longs to be seen, but their mind refuses to take the risk, trapping them in a self-made prison of invisibility. Fear of authenticity is heavily tied to the fear of rejection, which the brain perceives as a threat to survival. Humans are wired to seek belonging because, historically, exclusion meant danger. But for some individuals, this instinct becomes hyperactive due to past experiences. A single painful moment being laughed at for expressing a dream, being told a hobby is weird, being emotionally dismissed when showing vulnerability can reshape psychological patterns for decades. The brain stores these experiences as warnings, creating a neural alarm system that activates whenever authenticity tries to surface. Because of this, the person becomes hyper-aware of social cues, overanalyzing facial expressions, tone of voice, and micro-reactions. They replay conversations in their mind, trying to predict whether they said something unacceptable. Their fear becomes anticipatory, meaning they imagine rejection before it even occurs. This keeps them locked in a cycle of self-censorship, where they avoid expressing anything that feels too personal, unique, or emotionally revealing. As a result, they shrink themselves psychologically, dimming their personality, creativity, and desires to fit into a version of themselves designed entirely for social survival. Another powerful force behind the fear of being oneself is emotional perfectionism, the belief that one must always appear composed, agreeable, and emotionally stable to be accepted. These individuals fear being seen in moments of sadness, anger, insecurity, or confusion because they associate emotional expression with weakness or judgment. Many of them grew up in environments where emotions were minimized, mocked, or punished. Instead of learning how to regulate emotions, they learned how to conceal them. As adults, they may seem calm and easygoing, but internally they experience intense emotional pressure. They avoid crying in front of others, avoid sharing struggles, and avoid revealing anything that could make them look imperfect. This emotional isolation creates deep internal fatigue because suppressing emotions requires immense mental energy. Over time, they may feel disconnected not only from others but from their own emotional world. They might even lose the ability to identify what they truly feel, relying instead on numbness or distraction as coping mechanisms. Their greatest fear is that if someone saw their real emotional complexity, they would be viewed as needy, dramatic, or unworthy. When someone enters a cycle of emotional withdrawal, it usually doesn't happen in a dramatic, visible way. It begins quietly, almost unnoticed, with small shifts in behavior that outsiders rarely understand. A person might start responding with shorter messages, avoiding eye contact, leaving conversations earlier, or simply feeling mentally exhausted by interactions that once felt natural. This kind of internal retreat is often misunderstood as arrogance or coldness, when in reality, it is a protective mechanism formed after repeated emotional injuries. People who withdraw aren't choosing isolation because they dislike others. They're choosing it because it feels safer than being disappointed again. Over time, this pattern becomes a psychological habit, deeply rooted in fear, hypervigilance, and the belief that connection inevitably leads to pain. What most people don't see is the invisible battle between the desire for closeness and the fear of vulnerability. The withdrawn individual constantly analyzes every social signal, questioning motives, tone of voice, intentions, and even harmless comments. This mental overactivity exhausts them, pushing them further inward. Their silence is not emptiness. It is the weight of emotions they cannot express. As this internal conflict grows, the person may begin to create an emotional mask to get through daily life. They smile when expected, engage in conversations at a surface level, and pretend to be unaffected by things that actually cut deeply. This mask becomes a defense strategy, and with time they may feel like they are living two separate lives, the external self that interacts with the world and the internal self that hides in the shadows. This disconnection can lead to a profound sense of loneliness, even in the presence of others. The truth is that emotional withdrawal often begins as a form of self-defense, but eventually becomes a cage. The individual might desperately want to express what they feel, but fears that opening up would lead to judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding. This creates a psychological loop where they crave connection yet avoid it simultaneously. The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to dismantle the walls they have built. Not because they don't want to, but because vulnerability feels like stepping into enemy territory without armor. One of the deepest struggles for people in this emotional state is the inability to trust their own perception. After years of being hurt, manipulated, dismissed, or betrayed, they start questioning whether their emotions are valid at all. They replay past interactions in their mind, searching for warning signs they missed, moments they were too open, or situations where someone took advantage of their kindness. This internal detective work becomes obsessive, draining, and overwhelming. As a result, they begin to interpret the world through a lens of caution and suspicion. Every new relationship feels like a potential threat, and every compliment feels like manipulation disguised as kindness. They doubt intentions, even those that are genuinely good, because experience has taught them that not everything or everyone is what it seems. This leads to a paradox. They want to be understood, but they also fear being known too deeply. They want connection, yet push away anything that looks like intimacy. Trust becomes a luxury they no longer believe they can afford, even though deep inside they long for someone safe enough to rebuild it with. Despite the emotional heaviness, there is something profoundly resilient about individuals who withdraw into themselves. Their isolation is not a sign of weakness, but evidence of the strength it took to survive psychological battles that others never witnessed. These people often become incredibly self-aware, reflective, and perceptive. They have learned to observe the subtleties of human behavior, tone changes, micro-expressions, inconsistencies in words and actions. This sensitivity, though painful, becomes a form of emotional intelligence that many others lack. But the tragedy lies in how they turn this gift inward, using it not to understand others, but to criticize themselves relentlessly. Over time, this internal narrative becomes a quiet, destructive force. They begin to believe that keeping distance is kinder than letting anyone get close enough to be affected by their perceived brokenness. What they fail to see is that their depth, sensitivity, and capacity to understand emotions are precisely what make them extraordinary, not unlovable. The journey out of this emotional labyrinth is not fast, and it is never easy, but it begins with one crucial realization. Withdrawal is a response to pain, not a personality trait. It is something learned, which means it can also be unlearned. Healing starts when the person begins to recognize that their vulnerability is not a danger, but a bridge. Bit by bit, they can allow themselves small risks, expressing a feeling, accepting a compliment, asking for help, or simply being honest about what hurts. These steps, though tiny, begin to reshape their internal world. Over time, they understand that not everyone is a threat, not every intention is harmful, and not every connection ends in loss. The goal is not to erase the past, nor to become someone they are not. It is to reclaim the parts of themselves that were buried beneath fear. The more they allow themselves to be seen, even imperfectly, the more they realize that true connection is worth the risk. Healing does not happen by becoming invulnerable, but by choosing softness in a world that once taught them to be hard.